the Iceman.
He was found in a glacier, frozen in time for 5,000 years.
High in the icy Alps, a body frozen for over 5,000 years was discovered by hikers in 1991. What seemed like an ordinary find soon revealed a chilling truth. This man, known as Ötzi, wasn't just an ancient relic. He was a victim of violence, betrayed by those around him. His death, frozen in time, left us with questions that have haunted scientists for decades. Who was he? What happened to him? And why did his life end so violently? Ötzi's story is not just history. It's a chilling reminder of human conflict and survival.
So now we found this body with a copper X that is much older, so the whole chronology of the Copper Age had to be changed.
In the quiet, frozen expanse of the Alps, a discovery that would change our understanding of human history lay hidden for more than 5,000 years. It wasn't until September 1991 that two hikers, Erica and Helmut Simon, stumbled upon something extraordinary while trekking through a rugged and remote pass in the Ötzi Alps, straddling the border between Austria and Italy. The day seemed like any other, a crisp autumn hike beneath the clear sky. But the moment their eyes fell upon the form half exposed in the melting ice, everything changed.
It's considered to be the oldest human mummy found intact, and scientists believe he died more than 5,000 years ago. Because of new DNA technology, they're reimagining what he actually looked like.
Initially, the couple believed they had found the body of a recent hiker who had tragically lost their life in the unforgiving mountains. The frozen terrain was notorious for claiming lives, and this body, though lifeless, didn't seem particularly out of place. However, as they drew closer, subtle differences began to emerge, hinting at something far more remarkable. The figure they had found wasn't dressed in the modern synthetic fabrics one would expect from a recent climber. Instead, the body was clothed in a thick leather tunic, with woolen garments and shoes stuffed with grass, a primitive form of insulation. The clothing was unlike anything the hikers had ever seen, as though it belonged to a different age altogether. The body appeared eerily preserved. The skin, darkened and leathery, was surprisingly intact, suggesting a state of preservation that defied the typical effects of time. It wasn't just a skeleton, or a set of decomposed remains. The body had been encased in ice for thousands of years, preserved as if suspended in time. The hands were still clasping a copper axe, an artifact whose greenish patina spoke of an age far beyond anything contemporary. The initial discovery was met with disbelief. What they had found was not a recent tragedy, but a relic from the past, an ancient mummy. At first, the authorities treated the discovery as a simple case of a lost hiker. However, as experts arrived on the scene, the true significance of the find became clear. Archaeologists and forensic specialists quickly understood the importance of what had been uncovered. This was no ordinary body. It was a man who had lived over 5,000 years ago during the Copper Age, a time period that was still somewhat shrouded in mystery. A team of experts was flown in by helicopter, and the area was cordoned off for further investigation. Carbon dating and forensic analysis began in earnest, and in a matter of days, the true extent of the discovery became apparent. The body, once thought to be that of a modern-day climber, was in fact from a time long before the written word, long before recorded history. This was no mere ancient corpse. It was a frozen snapshot of humanity in its early stages, preserved by the unforgiving cold of the mountain glacier. Scientists soon confirmed that the body belonged to an individual who had died more than 5,000 years ago, during the Copper Age, around 3,300 BCE. This period marked a significant point in human history, as early humans began to shift from nomadic lifestyles to more settled farming communities. It was an era of burgeoning technological development, particularly in metallurgy, which would soon lead to the introduction of copper and bronze tools. The discovery of this man, now known as Ötzi the Iceman, named after the Ötztal Alps, where he was found, offered an unprecedented glimpse into the life of an individual from a time long before written history. Ötzi's body wasn't just a preserved mummy, It was a living record of an ancient human, offering researchers insights into the clothing, tools, and even the diet of people from that time. In fact, the discovery of Ötzi's belongings was just as remarkable as the body itself. Among the items found with Ötzi were his clothing, a flint knife, a longbow, and even a copper axe. These tools were not just everyday objects. They were indicative of a sophisticated and well-developed society. The copper axe in particular was astonishing for its time. Copper tools were still relatively rare, and for someone to own such an item suggested a level of social standing. This wasn't just a hunter or wanderer. Ötzi was a craftsman, a man who belonged to a world on the cusp of significant technological advancements. Despite the awe that this discovery generated, the question that lingered for many was how had Ötzi's body been so well preserved? It wasn't just the freezing temperatures of the alpine ice that accounted for his remarkable preservation. The conditions of the glacier had created a sort of natural preservative effect, preventing the decomposition that typically occurs after death. His skin, though darkened by age, was still present and intact, allowing scientists to study it for traces of tattoos, diseases, and signs of his final moments. As experts continued their investigation, they found that Ötzi's body offered more than just physical artifacts. There were deeper mysteries hidden within the tissues of this ancient man. Forensic experts would go on to study the contents of his stomach, revealing the details of his last meal, a mixture of dried meat, grains, and fat, providing a rare glimpse into the diet of someone living in the Alpine mountains during the Copper Age. Yet, it wasn't just the discovery of the body and belongings that captivated the world. It was the more personal details that brought this ancient man to life. DNA analysis revealed that Ötzi's genetic makeup was surprisingly well preserved. His genetic material was extracted from his remains, and it revealed fascinating insights into his ancestry. Not only did his genes help scientists learn more about the health and physical attributes of the people from the Copper Age, but they also revealed much about his connections to other groups across Europe. But Ötzi's story was not one of simple discovery. In the years following his unearthing, as research into his life and death continued, a larger and more disturbing story began to unfold. It would not be a peaceful tale, but one that hinted at the violent end of a man caught in a struggle for survival. Far from simply being a tragic victim of the natural world, Ötzi's death appeared to be linked to a far darker chapter in human history. This early glimpse into Ötzi's world, the discovery of his clothing, his tools, his last meal, and even the analysis of his tattoos, set the stage for a deeper investigation into his life. Scientists would come to realize that his body not only held answers to questions long forgotten, but it also raised even more pressing questions about the past. What was his life really like? What did he do? And who were the people around him? And perhaps most chilling of all, who or what was responsible for his violent death? Ötzi the Iceman was no mere archaeological curiosity. He was a living testament to the ingenuity, resilience, and at times brutal realities of life in the Copper Age. What began as a seemingly routine hike had awakened a long-forgotten chapter of human history, one that would continue to captivate scientists, historians, and the public for years to come. In this frozen man, we found not just a relic from the past, but a key to understanding the early days of humanity. At the time of his death, Ötzi the Iceman was about 45 years old, which was considered relatively old for someone living during the Copper Age, when life expectancy was often short due to disease, malnutrition, and the hardships of life in the harsh environment of the Alps. Yet, despite his age, forensic evidence suggests that Ötzi was in the prime of his life when he met his tragic end. His bones, once carefully examined, revealed a man who had endured significant physical exertion and survived in an unforgiving landscape. His health, despite the roughness of his life, seemed to speak of resilience, strength, and an ability to adapt to the harshest of conditions. Ötzi was not a tall man by modern standards, standing at only 5 feet 3 inches and weighing around 110 pounds. However, his physical condition tells a different story. His bones, though small in stature, showed signs of extraordinary strength and endurance, developed over years of survival in the Alpine region. Forensic analysis revealed that he had spent much of his life carrying heavy loads and walking long distances over rugged terrain, which contributed to his robust physical form. His muscle structure indicated that he had lived an active and physically demanding lifestyle, one that required constant motion and exertion. He was no simple wanderer or hunter-gatherer, but rather a man who had learned to thrive in one of the most difficult environments on Earth. One of the most striking features of Ötzi's body was the presence of 61 tattoos etched across his skin. These tattoos were not decorative or ornamental as one might expect, but rather functional markings, applied for therapeutic purposes. Scientists believe that these tattoos were strategically placed near joints affected by arthritis or other forms of pain. This suggests that Ötzi may have been suffering from chronic conditions, likely the result of his physically demanding lifestyle. The tattoos may have been an ancient form of acupuncture, or a similar method used to alleviate pain. They were not a mere aesthetic choice, but rather an indication of Ötzi's attempts to manage his physical health in a time when medical knowledge was rudimentary at best. The marks on his body, still visible after thousands of years, serve as a silent testament to his struggles with pain and the rudimentary care he received. Ötzi's clothing was another key element in understanding his life. His garments were carefully crafted to protect him from the harsh alpine environment. His outfit consisted of multiple layers of animal hides, including a goat hide tunic and leggings, as well as a fur-lined hat and shoes stuffed with grass for insulation. These materials were not only functional, but also indicative of the resources available to Ötzi and his community. The clothes were designed for survival, providing warmth, flexibility, and protection from the elements. The craftsmanship of these garments was extraordinary, showcasing the skill of the people who lived in the Copper Age. They were practical and well thought out, designed to withstand the challenges of the mountain environment. In addition to his clothing, Ötzi carried a range of tools and weapons, further revealing the sophistication of his lifestyle. Among his possessions were a finely crafted flint knife, a longbow, and a copper axe. The copper axe, in particular, was a remarkable artifact. At the time, copper was a rare and valuable material, and an axe made of copper would have been a symbol of status and wealth. It was not merely a tool for hunting or crafting, it was a weapon that signified Ötzi's advanced knowledge of metallurgy. The presence of the copper axe suggested that Ötzi was not just a hunter or a craftsman, but someone with a level of technological knowledge that was rare for his time. The axe was not only functional, but also a valuable possession that could have been used for trade or to establish alliances with other groups. It was a symbol of his place within the social and technological developments of the Copper Age. However, as fascinating as Ötzi's life was, it was his death that revealed even deeper and more unsettling truths. Forensic analysis of his body showed signs of trauma that indicated Ötzi's final moments were far from peaceful. It became clear that he did not simply die from natural causes or the harsh conditions of the Alpine mountains. Instead, he was the victim of a violent attack, one that left him with wounds suggesting a desperate struggle for survival. The most striking of these injuries was a deep gash on Ötzi's left hand. This wound was consistent with a defensive injury, suggesting that Ötzi had tried to protect himself during an altercation. In addition to the hand wound, Ötzi's ribs showed signs of bruising and possible fractures, indicating that he had been involved in some form of violent confrontation. Blood from 4 other people was found on his belongings, further suggesting that Ötzi had not been alone at the time of his death. The presence of this blood hinted at the possibility of a conflict or battle with other individuals, though the exact nature of this encounter remains a mystery. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was the arrowhead embedded deep in Ötzi's left shoulder. This wound, which severed a major artery, was the fatal blow that ultimately led to his death. The placement of the arrowhead suggested that it was a deliberate and targeted attack, rather than an accidental injury. This finding added a new layer of mystery to Ötzi's story, Was he the victim of a tribal conflict, or was he a scapegoat for some other form of social strife? The evidence points to Ötzi's death as a murder, a cold, calculated act of violence that occurred high in the mountains, far from help or any possibility of survival. This discovery raised more questions than answers. Who had attacked Ötzi, and why? Was he a man on the run, trying to escape his enemies, or was he a victim of betrayal by those who once considered him an ally? The forensic evidence paints a picture of a man caught in a moment of desperate struggle, but the true circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery. The answers to these questions are elusive, and perhaps they always will be. What is certain, however, is that Ötzi's death was not a simple accident. It was the violent end of a man who had lived through and survived many challenges, only to be felled by a cruel and calculated attack. This darker side of Ötzi's story adds a new layer to the fascinating mystery of his life. It shifts the narrative from that of a simple prehistoric man to one of intrigue, violence, and unresolved conflict. Ötzi was not just a victim of the harsh alpine environment, he was also a victim of the violent world in which he lived. His story, frozen in time for over 5,000 years, serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of human life and the dark realities of survival in the ancient world. His remains, carefully preserved by the ice, offer us a glimpse into a past that is far more complex and violent than we may have imagined. As scientists continue to investigate and uncover the details of Ötzi's life and death, it becomes clear that his story is far from over. It is a story that continues to captivate the imagination and challenge our understanding of the prehistoric world. The discovery of Ötzi the Iceman did not just open a window into the past, it also sparked an intense scientific pursuit to unravel the mysteries of his origins, his health, and his lineage. With every new finding, a clearer picture began to emerge of who this man was, where he came from, and the world he inhabited. Among the most fascinating aspects of this investigation was the genetic analysis conducted on Ötzi's remains, which promised to shed light on his ancestry and the genetic makeup of prehistoric humans. The first step in this monumental scientific quest came soon after Ötzi's discovery, when researchers began the laborious process of extracting DNA from his remains. This was no easy feat. The DNA extracted from the frozen body had to be carefully isolated and analyzed, as ancient DNA is often fragmented, damaged, and vulnerable to contamination. In 2012, after years of painstaking work, scientists were able to sequence the first draft of Ötzi's genome. This was a groundbreaking achievement, offering a glimpse into the genetic history of a man who had lived more than 5,000 years ago. The initial DNA analysis provided a wealth of information about Ötzi's physical characteristics and his ancestry. One of the most notable findings was the discovery that Ötzi had light skin and brown eyes. This contradicted some of the earlier assumptions made based on his mummified remains. Many had speculated that he might have had darker skin and eyes, given his place of discovery in the Alps. However, the DNA analysis revealed that his skin tone was lighter, and his brown eyes were consistent with the genetic traits found in modern European populations. The DNA sequencing also revealed something even more surprising. Ötzi's genetic ancestry was linked to the steppe peoples who later migrated across Europe. This revelation suggested that the genetic makeup of the Copper Age populations in the Alps was more complex than previously thought. Ötzi's genes pointed to a connection with Indo-European peoples, a group that would go on to spread across Europe in the millennia after Ötzi's death. This discovery was both exciting and controversial, as it challenged the traditional understanding of prehistoric human migrations in Europe. Yet, as the excitement over these findings grew, so did skepticism within the scientific community. Critics of the initial analysis raised concerns about the accuracy of the DNA results. Ancient DNA research was still in its infancy, and contamination from modern DNA could easily skew the results. The technology available at the time, while impressive, was not as advanced as it is today, and researchers worried that the genetic material could have been compromised during the extraction process. The doubts surrounding the initial sequencing led to a renewed effort to revisit Ötzi's DNA. By 2023, significant advancements in DNA sequencing technology had been made. What was once considered an experimental field had matured into a precise science, capable of providing far more accurate results. A new team of geneticists, including leading experts from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and UR-EC Research, set out to sequence Ötzi's genome once more, using the most advanced methods available. This time, the geneticists focused on a less degraded part of Ötzi's remains, a fragment of bone taken from his hip. This area of the body, being denser, was less susceptible to contamination and degradation, ensuring a higher quality DNA sample. The process of extracting ancient DNA is incredibly complex and meticulous. Researchers had to carefully isolate the DNA fragments, which were often tiny and highly fragmented. Every step of the process required extreme precision to avoid contamination from modern DNA. After months of painstaking work, the new genetic sequence finally emerged, and the results were nothing short of revolutionary. The new sequencing revealed that the initial findings, while groundbreaking at the time, had been significantly flawed. The connection to steppe populations and the supposed genetic link to Indo-European peoples turned out to be the result of contamination from modern DNA. The earlier conclusion, that Ötzi was genetically linked to populations who migrated across Europe centuries after his time, was no longer valid. In fact, the revised sequencing painted a very different picture of Ötzi's genetic identity. The real story of Ötzi's genetic background was far more complex and fascinating than initially thought. The new genome revealed that over 92% of his genetic makeup traced back to Neolithic Anatolian farmers, the early agriculturalists who had migrated from what is now Turkey into Europe, roughly 8,000 years ago. These Anatolian farmers brought with them revolutionary technologies, such as agriculture, pottery, and new tools, which transformed the way of life in Europe. The farmers' arrival marked a significant shift in human history, as they introduced the concept of settled farming communities, which replaced the nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle that had dominated Europe for millennia. Ötzi, it turned out, was a descendant of these early Anatolian farmers. His genetic heritage revealed that he was part of a population that had settled in Europe long before the major migrations of the Bronze Age. However, Ötzi's ancestry was not just a straightforward connection to these early farmers. There was also a smaller component of his genome, roughly 8%, that came from the local hunter-gatherer populations who had lived in Europe before the arrival of the Anatolian farmers. This small but significant genetic contribution highlighted the complex interactions between these early farmers and the indigenous hunter-gatherers, a process of interbreeding and cultural exchange that shaped the genetic landscape of prehistoric Europe. Perhaps the most surprising revelation from the new genetic data was the discovery of Ötzi's closest living genetic relatives. Conventional wisdom had led many to believe that Ötzi's descendants would be found among the modern populations of Austria or northern Italy, the regions closest to where he was discovered. However, the reality was quite different. The genetic analysis revealed that Ötzi's closest living relatives are found on the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean. The Sardinians are known for their unique genetic makeup, which is largely descended from the Neolithic farmers who migrated into Europe thousands of years ago. This genetic isolation, caused by the island's geographic separation from mainland Europe, helped preserve the genetic traits of the early Anatolian farmers, making Sardinia some of the most genetically distinct populations in Europe. This finding has profound implications for our understanding of prehistoric Europe. It suggests that Ötzi's lineage, once widespread across the continent, had become isolated and nearly disappeared due to subsequent waves of migration and mixing. The genetic evidence points to a population that was largely wiped out by the forces of history, with only a few remaining pockets of this ancient lineage surviving in places like Sardinia. The 2023 sequencing also challenged long-held assumptions about the appearance of prehistoric Europeans. The conventional image of Ötzi, with his pale skin and blue eyes, was not supported by the new genetic data. Instead, it was revealed that Ötzi likely had darker skin than previously imagined, perhaps even darker than many modern Europeans. His eyes were brown, not blue, and he exhibited signs of balding, a genetic trait encoded on his X chromosome. These revelations forced scientists and the public alike to reconsider how they had visualized prehistoric people, especially given the biases and assumptions that had influenced previous reconstructions. The new genetic data also provided a clearer understanding of Ötzi's health and the diseases that affected him. Researchers discovered that he had a number of genetic predispositions to chronic illnesses that are still common today, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. In addition to these genetic markers, Ötzi's body showed signs of physical suffering, including the presence of ulcers, gallstones, and Lyme disease. These findings revealed that Ötzi's life, far from being one of health and vitality, was marked by ongoing struggles with disease and chronic pain. Despite the advances in genetic analysis, Ötzi's story remains far from complete. Each new piece of information adds complexity to the narrative of this ancient man, revealing more about his life, his health, and his place in the broader story of human history. The genetic sequencing of Ötzi's DNA has not only changed our understanding of his origins, but it has also reshaped our view of prehistoric Europe. What was once a simple tale of ancient human survival has now become a profound and intricate story of migration, interbreeding, and the complexities of human history. As research continues, it is likely that even more discoveries will be made, offering further insights into the life and legacy of Ötzi the Iceman. His story, frozen in time for over 5,000 years, continues to captivate the imagination and challenge our understanding of the distant past. Ötzi the Iceman's discovery and subsequent DNA analysis have not only reshaped our understanding of his physical and genetic heritage, but also revealed a complex and unexpected story about human history, migration, and survival. The new genetic sequencing has forced researchers to reconsider their previous assumptions about Ötzi and his place in the broader context of prehistoric Europe. Instead of simply being a relic of the past, Ötzi now stands as a symbol of how fragile our understanding of history can be when we rely on incomplete evidence or assumptions shaped by modern perspectives. The revelations about Ötzi's appearance, for instance, stand in stark contrast to the conventional image that had long been popularized. For decades, the image of Ötzi depicted him as a pale-skinned, light-eyed individual, fitting into a Eurocentric narrative of ancient Europeans. However, the new genetic findings have shown that Ötzi's skin was likely darker than previously thought, perhaps even darker than many modern Europeans. His brown eyes and noticeable lack of hair, evidenced by genetic markers, showing early balding, completely defy the typical reconstruction of ancient Europeans as pale-skinned and fair-eyed. This discovery calls attention to how deeply ingrained cultural biases have shaped the way we imagine prehistoric people. The revised understanding of Ötzi's genetic heritage also underscores the diversity and complexity of early human populations. His genetic makeup, which revealed that over 92% of his ancestry traced back to Neolithic Anatolian farmers, challenges the simplistic view that prehistoric Europe was homogeneous. These Anatolian farmers, who brought agriculture, domesticated plants, and new tools to Europe, are often credited with sparking a profound transformation in human society. However, Ötzi's genome tells a story of a more intricate interplay between these farmers and the indigenous populations that had lived in Europe before their arrival. The small but significant 8% of his genome that comes from hunter-gatherer populations shows the blending of these groups over thousands of years. challenging the notion of a sharp divide between them. Perhaps one of the most surprising aspects of the new genetic analysis was the discovery that Ötzi's closest living relatives are not from Austria or Italy, where he was discovered, but from the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean. Sardinia is known for its genetic uniqueness, as its isolated location has helped preserve the genetic makeup of the early Anatolian farmers who settled in the region thousands of years ago. This finding not only rewrites the geographic understanding of Ötzi's lineage, but also points to the ways in which isolation, both geographic and cultural, can preserve genetic traits while other populations experience mixing and migration. Ötzi's DNA, in essence, was a snapshot of a lineage that nearly vanished, swallowed by waves of population movements and migrations that reshaped the European genetic landscape. This discovery also offers a poignant lesson in the complexities of human history. The genetic isolation of Ötzi's ancestors and the gradual disappearance of their lineage due to later migrations highlight the fragility of human survival in the face of external forces. It's a reminder that even in prehistory, human populations were not static, but were constantly evolving, mixing and adapting to changing circumstances. Ötzi's people, living in relative isolation in the Alpine valleys, could not avoid the sweeping tides of migration and cultural transformation that were sweeping through Europe. Their bloodline, once widespread, was ultimately lost in the crucible of history, leaving behind only traces in the DNA of the few remaining pockets of their descendants, such as those in Sardinia. Furthermore, the idea that Ötzi's lineage was wiped out over time underscores the unpredictable nature of survival and adaptation. What might have seemed like a stable and enduring population, living high in the mountains and cut off from the outside world, was in fact living on borrowed time. Genetic isolation, while preserving certain traits, can also make a population more vulnerable to disease, inbreeding, and genetic defects. In Ötzi's case, his isolated lineage may have contributed to a lack of genetic diversity, leading to an accumulation of harmful mutations and making them more susceptible to diseases and other health issues. This theme of genetic vulnerability is echoed in the many health problems found in Ötzi's body. Despite his physical strength and resilience, Ötzi was burdened by chronic conditions like arthritis, heart disease, and infections. His body bore the scars of his difficult life, with painful ulcers, gallstones, and even the oldest known case of Lyme disease. These ailments paint a picture of a man who, though surviving the harsh alpine environment, was far from invincible. The tattoos on his body, believed to be therapeutic, further highlight his ongoing struggle with pain and illness. Far from the image of an ancient, idealized hunter-gatherer, Ötzi was a man plagued by the same chronic diseases that continue to affect modern humans. In many ways, Ötzi's story is a reflection of the broader human condition, a fight for survival in a harsh world, marked by vulnerability, strength, and the ever-present shadow of death. His life, though long past, remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of human existence. His death, likely the result of violence, reminds us that even in the distant past, conflict and brutality were part of the human experience. The arrow that struck him in the shoulder, severing an artery, and ultimately leading to his death, underscores the reality that survival was not only a matter of enduring the elements, but also of navigating the dangers of social and political conflict. The continued research into Ötzi's life and death also speaks to the enduring fascination with the past and the desire to understand the people who came before us. Every new discovery, whether about his health, his tools, or his genetic heritage, adds to the complex tapestry of human history. Yet, even as the story of Ötzi continues to unfold, it also reminds us of the limits of our knowledge. No matter how much we learn, the full truth of Ötzi's life and death may remain elusive, shrouded in the fog of time. What is certain, however, is that Ötzi has become a symbol of both the fragility and resilience of humanity. His preserved body, frozen in time for over 5,000 years, offers a direct link to a distant past that is both foreign and familiar. As scientists continue to study Ötzi's remains,
His story will continue to offer new insights into the lives of our ancient ancestors and the world they inhabited. And in doing so, Ötzi's legacy will continue to shape our understanding of the past and inform our perception of the present.